In 1995, the number of cars in all of China stood at a mere 2 million. Today, the number is 20 million and rising. Beijing has seen the most rapid growth of all, with 400,000 new cars rolling onto the city's roads in 2003 alone.
The car is the beating heart of this whole sort of consumer culture that China has become enamored of. And it's really one of the highest expressions of the individual's right to go where you want, when you want, with whom you want. The car is the mother of all symbols and the highest stage of symbolic success.
Today, it's increasingly hard to find a middle-class Chinese consumer who doesn't own or want to own a car. Xi Zhenong and Shirley Hung moved to Beijing to start their own business. He's a photographer and she's a writer. Together, they produce films about wildlife in China.
所以就很近嘛，我离它的距离就是那么2米多嘛，就2米左右嘛，这都没有2米1米多。
These two are more environmentally conscious than most Chinese, but even they are talking about buying a car. Shirley Hung is the driving force behind the decision, so it's her job to shop for the family car.
你好，请问您是哪里？那个燕村汽车交易市场。啊，好的。
乘客您好，欢迎您乘坐北京出租汽车，并对我们的服务进行接收。
反正我也特矛盾。你要说从个人角度来说哈
It's a very difficult decision. We've saved some money, and there are financing plans available, so we can afford to buy a car.
确实是方便。
It's more convenient, taking our daughter places.
对。
The bus can be so crowded, and in the winter, it's too cold to ride a bicycle.
And the traffic can be dangerous.
Right. With so many cars, sometimes we feel it's dangerous to put our daughter on a bicycle.
The Asian Games car market is the largest in Beijing. Here, competing dealers share a large outdoor space to showcase dozens of different makes and models. But almost none of them are Chinese. Because 20 years ago, China made a decision to let foreign companies make nearly all of its cars.
Well, remember at that time in the 1980s, there was very little foreign investment in China. So China went to these foreign auto companies and said, we'd like you to invest in our country. We have a gigantic market of 1.2 billion people, and please come and invest.
First to take the Chinese up on their offer was Beijing Jeep, a joint venture between American Motors Corporation and the Chinese government. Party officials approved of Jeep's utilitarian four-wheel drive design. Today, though, the factory is turning out something much different. Upscale SUVs that cater to a consumer market that has grown faster than anyone expected.
I think the primary factor that captures the imagination is just the magnitude of the numbers. The passenger car market grew here in China about 60% last year. This year we were not expecting that rate of growth, but it looks like we may get up to 80% this year.
Others, including Volkswagen, Ford, Suzuki, Toyota, and the world's largest automaker, General Motors, have since followed. All are hoping that China will take to cars like other affluent nations have.
We believe that China will absorb almost 20% of the entire world's growth in vehicles over the next 10 years. And somewhere around the turn of the quarter century, China will probably pass the U.S. as the world's largest auto market.
Hello.
Hello.
Are you looking for a Jetta?
Yes, I'm looking at the price.
It sells for 120,000 yuan. It's the top of the line with a manual shift.
How does it conform to environmental standards?
All Jettas conform to the Euro 2 emission standard.
This Volkswagen is a Chinese-built car, for sale only in China. The car looks as stylish and well-built as any American or European model, but looks can be deceiving. Under the hood lurks a dirty little secret. The Euro 2 emission standard, a proud selling point for the salesman, is actually 10 years out of date. Today, Europe conforms to a much cleaner standard called Euro 5, and American standards are even tougher.
Well, Chinese cars are just much more polluting than US or European cars, and that's because they don't have the same emissions control equipment that US or European or Japanese cars have. A Chinese car would never meet emissions control standards in the United States or Europe because the equipment in the Chinese cars is fairly antiquated.
The Chinese were determined to learn how to build cars, and protecting the environment was not a priority. When the partnership deals were negotiated, the government failed to impose state-of-the-art environmental standards, and the car makers didn't insist.
In terms of a foreign company doing business here within China, we work within the framework and within the regulations. I've been very satisfied with the partnership that we see between the foreign joint ventures here and the Chinese government.
Today, although China is addicted to outdated pollution controls in cars that are not fuel efficient, its auto industry has helped to lift millions out of poverty. Here, at General Motors' Shanghai plant, workers earn up to 1,000 yuan per month, putting them in the top 20% income bracket. And each car that rolls off its assembly line contains steel, glass, rubber, and other components fabricated by other workers in other Chinese factories, making cars one of the most powerful engines of the Chinese economic miracle.
China's made the automobile industry a pillar industry. I think they're getting ever more dependent on it because it is expanding at such a staggering rate, and it's creating jobs. And there's one thing that China needs now, it's jobs.
To keep up, even with its modest population growth, China needs to create 15 million new jobs each year. By some estimates, the auto industry and related businesses employ 7% of the country's private sector workforce, providing a living for tens of millions of people. Few consumers are pressing for more effective pollution controls that could raise the price of cars, and the government doesn't want to do anything that could slow down sales and cost the country jobs.
The challenge of jobs and employment, I think, is one of the biggest headaches for the Chinese government. In fact, it's their biggest nightmare. They're so concerned about social stability, avoiding chaos, keeping the system together. You have in the cities tens of millions of former state workers now losing their jobs, very resentful. So if there is a severe slowdown or a real slump in economic growth, this will be very dangerous for the rule of the Communist Party.
The government's got to keep this wheel spinning, or they may end up getting spun right out of office. China has a terrible dilemma upon which it is impaled. It has to develop to improve the standard of living for people. And yet, at the same time, the environmental consequences of that development are so enormous.
Every month, Beijing's 4x4 Club welcomes new members. Today, a half a dozen rookies are learning how to gun 3 tons of Jeep up a vertical embankment.
咱们就上车，能开的咱们就开。如果你觉得你开不了，你在旁边等我一会儿。千万得记住啊，用4轮驱动的，最好用低速。
Chinese consumers appear to be taking to gas-guzzling SUVs much as Americans have, without much concern about the environmental consequences.
When we look at the SUV market in the U.S., I think the market share is about 20 to 25% of the total market. Here within China, the SUV segment is just beginning to expand. We see the SUV segment over the next 5 to 10 years more than doubling from the point we are today.
If there were as many cars per person in China as there are today in the United States, China would have 800 million plus cars, which is 4 times more than we have in the United States today.
In the year 2000, the Chinese government used its absolute authority to ban leaded gasoline in a single stroke. The government could act just as decisively with emission standards, but so far it is taking a gradual approach. But even the strictest standards cannot prevent an internal combustion engine from producing carbon dioxide as a byproduct of burning gasoline. And that means that China, considered the number 2 contributor to global warming, could become number 1.
20到2030年期间
We estimate that between 2020 and 2030, China's emission of carbon dioxide will probably increase greatly. By then, it will be hard to tell who is the largest emitter, China or the United States.